push the button. I hope it's not crooked.
Hi, I'm Lindsey Dragun. I work at PBS, and my presentation, Accessibility for the Modern Web. While preparing this, I thought a lot about what, sorry, someone's at the door. Hello? Hi, someone will be down to let you in shortly. Should not have used my phone number for that.
I know, I feel terrible now. I should have.
It's okay. So while preparing this, I thought a lot about what I had seen other accessibility presentations do, and I'm trying to avoid a lot of the describing ARIA tags or alt tags that they do in a lot of those, and give a broad overview, but then also give a few detailed looks at things that I don't normally see come up. And you'll have to also excuse me, this is not my computer, and it's kind of a last minute change. So the basics, obviously, accessibility affects a broad amount of people. I think it would be better if I use this. Some sites are required to have it, and devs and also product managers are not always aware that they are required to have it. And starting out accessible is a lot easier than adding it in. Some accessibility concerns, which you probably have all seen before, but blindness, color blindness, seizure disorders, motor control issues, migraines, anxiety disorders, deafness, autism, ADHD, and there's huge lists of them if you want to look that up. WCAG is the standards that most people follow in the US and in other places in the world, depending on where they are. And under 2.0, there's principles called CORE, and for that you have, it should be perceivable, and that means the information can't be invisible to all of a user's senses. Even if they don't have as many senses as other people, at least one of them has to be able to comprehend the information. There's operable, that means the interface can't require interactions that a user cannot perform. It has to be able to work with whatever they're using to interact with it. Understandable is pretty understandable, and that's that the information and operation of the user interface must be something that people can understand. It can't be too complicated, it can't be too odd. It should follow standards that most other websites follow. And robust just means that there needs to be enough to it that it can be interpreted reliably by whatever the user is using to go through it. So if they're using a screen reader, it has to be able to be used with the screen reader. A few easy fixes right off the bat is proper color contrast, which helps with people who are colorblind, people who have low vision, and don't rely on colors for information. If you have text and text turns red when they do something wrong, that doesn't help anyone that has low vision or color blindness. Closed captioning is a huge deal for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And even transcripts can help a lot in that situation. A lot of the people I know aren't very picky because so few things actually have written material for them to use that even transcripts seem like a great, huge deal for them. Alt tags, obviously, keeping the focus state is something that you might clash with designers on. A lot of them find it ugly or it interferes with their vision. And they might tell you, like, go into the CSS and take that out. But do not. That is so important for people who are tabbing through and using keyboard navigation or other forms of interacting with the screen where they can't always tell where they are. Allow for zooming. If you have a website and you've disabled zooming, that means people who need to see things at a bigger way can't view it. Pictures, text, whatever. you'd be surprised how many websites actually disable zooming. And don't use flashy colors or animations. This can be really hard not to do, but for people with ADHD and autism, it can be really distracting. And so if you have a way that they can disable animations on your website, if you have to have animations, that's really good. If you can just avoid using a lot of flashy, moving things, that's even better.
Okay, so when you say animations, you mean like even the stuff where it just, like people have things that roll or like the carousel type things?
That is not as bad, but if you have a carousel that moves automatically, you should definitely have a way to pause it so that they can manually move it if they want to. It depends, obviously the autism spectrum is huge, and what exactly people with ADHD and ADD have problems with varies. But it can distract them from the actual content of your site. And also for people with anxiety disorders, it can trigger that too if they see something moving suddenly that they weren't expecting. So just having like a pause button on your carousels can help a lot.
Yeah, you know, well, I was just thinking, like, when I go in to read something, there's just, like, even the, you know, when they want you to sign up for a newsletter and all of that, is that, I mean, I know this isn't, maybe not fall into the category of accessibility, but even stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, obviously, modals and pop-ups are very controversial. They're hard in general for accessibility. It's very hard to give them the proper focus state so people can keyboard navigate to them, but also they have issues with possibly causing some sort of problems for people who have attention issues because suddenly they're there. But it's something that a lot of people use and probably won't be going away anytime soon on the web. So why you might want accessibility, and this is obviously for people who need an excuse. A lot of business places might not be willing to let you spend the time making something accessible, even though you really want to. And the main reasons are regulations might require it, you want a larger audience, and accessibility makes code better. So for regulations, there's probably somewhat familiar to some of you. There's Section 508, Section 504, the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, and a few others that, depending on your specific situation, might come up. 508 is generally for government agencies, and they're required to have accessible technology, though there are exceptions for this. A lot of national security things, like cryptography, have exceptions within the Act. And then Section 504 is for anyone getting money from the government. So if you get a small business loan from the federal government, if you get grants from the federal government, you fall under 504. 504 does not have any specific criteria for what makes it accessible. So a lot of agencies have been going by the 508, which does have criteria that you can look up and read and make sure you follow. And that's important too, even if you're not doing something with the federal government now, but you're planning on doing it, making it accessible already can save you a lot of time in the end. And then Americans with Disabilities Act covers businesses and nonprofits offering certain services. The big one that you might hear about a lot is ones offering education and training. These must be something that is accessible to however many people might want it. So, for example, University of California, Berkeley recently got in trouble with the Justice Department under ADA Title III. They had a bunch of edX videos. Most of them didn't have closed captioning. A lot of them had really complicated charts and tables that there was no way to make accessible. And a lot of them had extra learning materials that were completely inaccessible to screen readers. So Berkeley was at risk of losing their federal funding. And their decision for this, instead of going back and putting closed captioning in, was to just remove the videos from the internet. So this has caused a lot of controversy. People are blaming the Justice Department for it, but this is an example of why if you start with accessibility, you have a lot less problems in the end, because they had thousands of videos that they would have had to have closed captioned. But if they just started at the very beginning making transcripts or captioning, they would have had a lot less to do. And the Justice Department itself enforces a lot of these standards, but they don't have many ways to do that. They can cut your funding or they can sue you. And generally, if they are going to do either one of that, they give you a warning and give you time to fix whatever issue you had. So it's not like the end all be all for anyone. So, increased audience. 1 in 5 Americans report some form of disability, and so that's a huge part of the population that you might not be reaching. But also, many developers and others use keyboard navigation. So if you want to, say, get more developers on your team, you might want to have a website that they can keyboard navigate through. Parents and people learning languages tend to use closed captioning. Parents, so they don't disturb kids or so they can watch stuff with swearing in it. People learning languages so they can see the words as they're being spoken. And people also just appreciate not having to put on reading glasses. So if you have the proper sort of color contrast for your text, that can help a lot with older people or other farsighted people. And how does it make code better? So accessibility already follows W3 guidelines for HTML, and that means it will be easier for future developers to read it, and it will also keep up with current standards. So for example, if you're using headings, you're supposed to only have one H1 on a page, and then they're supposed to go in order, H2, H3, etc. If a developer comes in who's unfamiliar with the project and there's an H5 and there's nothing before it, they might get really confused about what they're missing. So if you actually follow these standards, you're following web standards. And along with that, semantic HTML is also a standard for accessibility. That's like having your main content in a main tag and other ways of just making it more readable for anyone working on the code. And again, how to bring accessibility to your workplace. It's the right thing to do. It increases your audience. It makes your company look good. It might already be required or could end up being required. And it makes development faster after the initial work. I wanted to show a few gotchas, and I have one example from my own work. And a lot of accessibility gotchas seem to come from screen readers. They don't all work the same, and they don't all work the same in all browsers. So one issue that we had was SVG icons. We were using normal font icons, and then we transitioned to inline SVGs for all of our icons. And general accessibility standards for SVGs say you should have a detailed description. But if you're using these SVGs just for icons, you could end up making people on screen readers read like a sentence-long description every time they just want to look at something the icon is there for. So for example, this is our play icon, and this is our code, and going by accessibility standards, our description would be something like a filled black equilateral triangle with slightly rounded corners. So every time they clicked on a play button, which is already in a button which says play, they might also get that depending on their screen reader. So we could instead just use a title that says play symbol. People on screen readers are familiar with common symbols that we use. They've experienced them a lot, and they're not that different from the average internet user in that way. And what this actually looks like is less important than what it stands for. So if we have a page with 50 videos on it, what they really need to know is that's a play symbol, not what it looks like. Some tools used for accessibility, since I've been mentioning them. These are also called assistive or adaptive technologies. Sorry for the typo. These are screen readers, keyboard navigation, and alternate mice and input tools. So screen readers rely heavily on alt tags and ARIA tags, and they do not like a lot of the popular design choices like infinite scrolling and lazy loading. Oftentimes when someone's tabbing through a website, they'll go too fast for that to catch up to, and they'll miss a lot of content. And JAWS is the most popular one for Windows, and Mac comes with its own called VoiceOver that you can access just by doing Command F5 on a Mac. And then Chrome and other browsers also have them available. I like Chromebox for Chrome. And so here's a GIF. I couldn't get the sound to work right, so I just made a GIF. But this is what VoiceOver for Mac is going through as I tab through YouTube. So link, upload, link, sign in, link, trending list, Chrome, YouTube, Windows, and Chrome, button. So it will say whatever you label it, and then also say whatever it is. And if you're not labeling anything, they'll just hear button, 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 link, 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 without any guidance to what exactly they're going over. Some alternative input tools, which is important to think about as you're working with your focus states and also how big you're making links and buttons. There's obviously mice with different tools like trackpads, joysticks, larger buttons. There's eye tracking, which is exactly what it sounds like. It tracks someone's eye movements. And there's sip and puff, which you may have seen sometimes. People have a tube and it will respond to the air that they put through it. There's head motion tracking, where they'll have an infrared dot on their forehead, and the way they move their head is sensed by the hardware and software. And then just foot pedals instead of mice for people who have an easier time moving their feet. I have a few videos I'll show, but first, here's an example of a foot pedal for a mouse, and these come in all different shapes and sizes. And then I was particularly caught by this story, but Natasha Lambert sailed a yacht with just the sip and puff method. So she was just blowing air into a tube to sail a yacht. And here's some, if I can get to my videos. Nope, okay. So.
I cannot tell you how much joy, how much laughter, how much independence.
This is eye tracking. You can see it.
It seriously changed my life.
Here.
This technology is.
Oh wow, sorry. So as he's moving his eyes, it's following it and putting a like a mouse pointer where he's falling. And then one area I think is really fascinating is with gaming, because there's so many ways people have attempted to make gaming work. And for this one, he has a switch behind his head, so when he moves his head, it uses certain technologies to basically do whatever he needs. And this particular person, Christopher Hills, he edits videos and plays video games and has like a whole YouTube channel of him doing all of this with just head movements. And that's really great for users with cerebral palsy or other issues where they don't have as fine motor control. And so resources for all of this. There's the W3, which does the WCAG standards, Ally Project, which is a great accessibility source. JAWS, the screen reader for Windows, has a free trial. You get it for 30 minutes at a time, but if you restart, you can start it all over again. So if you do a virtual machine on your computer running Windows and then get that, you can just restart the virtual machine over and over again to check on JAWS. Wave, the web accessibility evaluation tool, is pretty good. You can put in a URL and it will go through it and check for you. And there's also a browser extension you can get. I have it in Chrome, and it just goes through and like points out everything wrong with the accessibility on the website. Chrome has accessibility Devtools. When you get that extension and you open up your regular Devtools, it's a tab in there that will also go through and show you different issues you might have. No Copy Vision Simulator will change whatever website you're looking at to look like it's through different visual impairments. So you can get it colorblind with no color. You can see what it looks like if you have cataracts or not, and just go through a whole bunch of different ways of seeing your website. A Checker is another accessibility checker. Actionable Game Accessibility by Able Gamers is a resource if you're making games and you want to make those accessible. And it includes talking about the different tools people use to play games and the different ways that you can make a game accessible. And then IBM Accessibility is actually really good if you do have complicated charts or tables or data that you want to make accessible. They have standards for that and examples of how you can do that. And my name is Lindsey Dragun. You can reach me at lmdragon@gmail.com. And I'm also at Twitter at lmdragon, though right now it's a lot of politics, so you might not want to look. And I can take questions.
So I was actually wondering, you mentioned that focus states can be kind of an issue. Have you had any experience with using something other than an outline, like changing the color of the button, or outlines pretty much the...
Outlines are pretty much it. You can also put an underline in the link in a button. That can work too. Changing the color becomes difficult when people do have vision impairment as well. If they have issues seeing color or seeing very clearly, they might not see a color change, whereas a focus state is also something that changes the shape a little bit and the size. So you could also change the shape or size of something, or fill something in that's empty could also potentially work.
Along the same lines, one of the things that we run into a lot is links, because designers now don't want to underline links,
Yeah.
especially if you have a lot of them on the page and it's cluttered and everything. So we, have them differentiated by color, but that's apparently not satisfactory, by accessibility standards. Is there a new standard that is evolving for how to display links?
It's still basically underlines. The underline is understood to be a link by most people, so it's a standard that comes up a lot. You could also potentially, if they're really insisting on not having it change in any way but color, compare the two colors and make sure that they are very different. Or you could also do something like fill in a background and have it be a different color in the text, just so there's an obvious contrast between what it was and what it is now. Also, there's different CSS transformations you could potentially look into too that might change it up just a little bit and make it like different than it had been. But I'd suggest also just checking out the new copy extension and seeing what it looks like there. Mm-hmm.
We were just having some issues on our website with phone numbers, and trying to, across different departments, we're styling all the phone numbers differently, some with dots, some with dashes. And we were trying to figure out the best way because screen readers were also having trouble reading phone numbers.
Yeah.
We couldn't seem to find something that defined it as a phone number so that it would sound like a phone number. And it just looked really clunky when we have like 1 space 5 space 5 5. Like,
Yeah.
So that way the screen reader would read it like people read phone numbers. Is there any good way to do that?
You could potentially make the dashes visibly hidden make the dashes aria hidden and then put spaces in that are visibly hidden so people don't see them when they're looking at them, but the screen reader will notice them. We do that with our Facebook like button, for example. We have a Facebook like button. If you look at it, you know, if you click that, it likes it on Facebook. Not very helpful for people that can't see the button. So we have that aria hidden, so screen readers ignore it. But we have the overall link have a span that's visibly hidden from people looking at it that reads like this on Facebook. So screen readers will say like this on Facebook instead of trying to interpret the button. So that's like a tool that we use a lot. We also used it for some of our video controls. So depending on how you work with it, it can be pretty helpful.
Do you have any good examples that we can look at, like the websites that follow these guidelines?
YouTube is actually pretty good. A lot of the Google stuff is pretty good. Our site, pbs.org, is decent. There's a few places that we're still trying to fix things, but it's definitely better than all of our competitors.
What's that again?
pbs.org. Except Netflix, they're also really good.
They have probably an army of programs.
Yes,
so,
yes. And YouTube benefits because they can use HTML5 video first, which gives you a lot more control in the browser controls.
So is your presentation, is it going to be available online?
Yes.
Like it is?
So you can get it right now. It's it's slides.com/lmdragun, like this, /accessibility-for-the-modern-web. But I will put that, yeah, I was about to say, I'm going to put that in a comment in the meetup. And that, you can also, like, if you have a slides.com account, you can fork the different slideshows you like, so you have them, like, forever. So, yeah.
Is there a resource for like mobile accessibility?
A lot of this will be the same. With mobile accessibility especially, you have to watch out for things like how big everything is, because not everyone has the fine controls to touch a tiny link. And what I said about making sure you don't disable zooming in and out is really big on mobile sites. And also a lot of the accessibility checkers, if you go into something like Chrome Devtools and put your website into the mobile section and then run that, like some of them will work with that, and then you'll be able to make sure that the sizing and spacing can work. But yeah, a lot of the standards are still the same. The screen readers on the phones do a lot of the same things, but with all screen readers, they're not all going to work the same way, on the same platform, in the same browsers. There's things that will work with JAWS and IE and Safari, but won't work with JAWS in Firefox and Chrome. And like with everything else, you have to kind of go through and check. So phones are just another version of that, but a lot of phones have built-in screen readers too, so you can turn that on in your settings and just go through it and see what it does.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious, do you guys have it baked into the process of like, when you propose a new feature, like, do your designers have like a checklist or something?
We have somewhat of a checklist. We have 2 UX designers who, for most of our projects, will go over it and make sure that the general accessibility standards are there. And then our senior front-end dev and myself tend to do the code that goes into it, like with the ARIA labels and the alt tags. So there's no real checklist, and a lot of people online do have checklists. If you like Google accessibility checklist, you will find so many checklists. But also a lot of it is knowing what your readers, or what your viewers do, and what your users want from your website, and not all websites will have the same use cases.
How are people in the private sector, say you're not necessarily doing anything with the government, you're just strictly private, I mean, how do they approach this? Or how are they, what is the trend there? Do you know anything about that?
From what I've seen, it depends mostly on what type of business it is. A lot of them will try to do at least the bare minimum, which is like putting alt tags on images and links and maybe a few ARIA labels here and there. But if you actually go through a lot of major websites for private companies, you might notice that they're hard to navigate through even with a mouse, or that the color contrast can be bad, even just you looking at like a website with perfect vision. And so it seems to be just up to the company. But a lot of people do end up getting sued because they actually do have to follow standards and they don't realize they have to. All it takes is if you do anything educational, anything training, anything that is available for the wider public that can enrich them, will generally mean you should have some accessibility.
Right, so it's making a case, so for
yeah, you don't want to get sued. That works with all of our product people, right?
Another thing is so many websites now are built on CMS
Yes.
products, and a lot of those, the WordPress shop, they're going to put that stuff in for
Yes.
if it's sending it, particularly if it's a commercial thing that you're implementing. So we're
And-
going to have a lot of them.
okay, it's already embedded.
Yeah, and Bootstrap and a few other
Right.
sources will have a lot of accessibility built in. It's generally, though, there's the newer frameworks that come out tend to have less accessibility at first and then add them in. So it's good to always check for that. Like React started out not very accessible and now it's becoming more accessible.
But that reminds me of a question about JavaScript and accessibility, because a lot of times I will turn JavaScript off and see what happens on our website when we have a lot of issues. And then the project managers or the clients are like, oh, whatever, everybody has JavaScript. And not everybody has JavaScript, but, we had some problems with Bootstrap because certain things weren't working with JavaScript turned off. So how does that also, is that more of an accessibility issue, or is that more of some kind of feature issue with JavaScript?
I would say it's probably more of a feature issue at this point because so much accessibility is done through JavaScript these days. Even just adding labels to things or shifting something in and out of a focus state and putting a certain label on that is done with JavaScript. It's important to make it as accessible as possible without, but there's also always going to be extra things that you just can't do in HTML or you just can't get out right away, and you should just try to keep that to as many nice extra features as possible as opposed to the standard features you need. Any other questions? No? Okay, guess we're done. Okay, I'm gonna put up the link right now, and that has my email address in it, and if anyone comes up with questions later, feel